Viking mythology, also known as Norse mythology, is a body of myths originating from the North Germanic peoples, particularly those from Scandinavia during the Viking Age. This mythology developed over centuries and was passed down orally through skalds and storytellers. The stories were eventually recorded after the Christianization of Scandinavia, particularly in Iceland, around the 12th and 13th centuries. Central to Viking mythology are the deities, heroes, and mythical creatures that the Vikings believed in, which served as explanations for the forces of nature, the creation of the world, and the eventual fate of the cosmos. Creation of the world. In Viking mythology, the world's creation is a tale of violence and chaos. Before the world as we know it existed, there was Ginnungagap, a yawning void between the lands of fire, Muspelheim, and ice, Niflheim. When the heat of Muspelheim met the cold of Niflheim, it caused the ice to melt, giving rise to Ymir, the first giant. From Ymir's sweat came other giants, and from his body parts, the gods created the world. Odin, the chief of the gods, along with his brothers Vila and Ve, killed Ymir. They fashioned the earth from his flesh, the seas from his blood, and the sky from his skull. Ymir's bones formed the mountains, and his hair became the trees. The world they created was known as Midgard, the realm of humans. The gods of Asgard. The most prominent gods in Viking mythology resided in Asgard, one of the 9 worlds connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree. These gods, known as the Aesir, were led by Odin, the Allfather. Odin was the god of wisdom, war, and death, often portrayed as a one-eyed figure with immense knowledge. He gained his wisdom by sacrificing his eye at Mimir's well and hanging himself on Yggdrasil for 9 days. Odin's wife, Frigg, was the goddess of motherhood and fate. She was also known for her foresight, although she rarely shared her knowledge. Thor, the god of thunder, was one of the most beloved deities in Viking mythology. Known for his immense strength, Thor protected both gods and humans from the giants, often using his mighty hammer, Mjolnir, to battle foes. He rode across the skies in a chariot pulled by 2 goats, causing thunder as he traveled. Another central figure was Loki, a trickster god whose actions often brought chaos. Although not an Aesir by birth, Loki lived among them and played a significant role in many myths. He could shapeshift and was known for his cunning and mischief, yet his deeds eventually led to his downfall and the coming of Ragnarok, the end of the world. The Valkyries and Valhalla. The Valkyries, female warriors who served Odin, were responsible for selecting fallen warriors on the battlefield and bringing them to Valhalla. Valhalla was a grand hall where the bravest warriors, known as the Einherjar, trained for the final battle at Ragnarok. These warriors feasted every night and engaged in combat during the day, preparing for their role in defending the gods during the world's end. The Norns. In Viking mythology, the Norns were 3 powerful female beings who controlled fate. Their names were Urd, past, Verdandi, present, and Skuld, future. They lived at the base of Yggdrasil and wove the fates of gods and men. Even the gods could not escape the fate determined by the Norns. The 9 worlds. Yggdrasil, the world tree, was the cosmic structure that connected the 9 worlds of Viking mythology. These worlds included Asgard, home of the Aesir gods, Midgard, the realm of humans, and Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Other important realms were Niflheim, the icy land of the dead, Muspelheim, the fiery world, and Alfheim, home of the light elves. Each world played a role in the Viking cosmology, representing various forces of nature and different aspects of life and death. Ragnarok. Ragnarok was the prophesied end of the world in Viking mythology. It was a series of events, including a great battle that would lead to the death of many gods, including Odin and Thor. According to the myth, Loki would break free from his chains and join forces with the giants to wage war against the gods. The world would be consumed by fire and water, and Yggdrasil would tremble. However, from the destruction, a new world would arise, with 2 human survivors, Lif and Lifthrasir, who would repopulate the earth. The role of giants. The giants, or Jotnar, played a significant role in Viking mythology, often acting as the adversaries of the gods. However, their relationship with the gods was complex. Giants were not inherently evil but represented chaos and natural forces beyond human control. Some giants, such as Skadi, even married gods. Skadi was a giantess who became the wife of the sea god Njord. The ongoing tension between the gods and the giants symbolized the constant struggle between order and chaos in the world. The sagas and Eddas. Much of what is known about Viking mythology comes from 2 primary sources, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. The Poetic Edda is a collection of anonymous Old Norse poems, while the Prose Edda was written by the Icelandic historian and poet Snorri Sturluson in the early 13th century. These texts contain many of the foundational myths of Viking mythology, including tales of creation, the deeds of the gods, and the prophecy of Ragnarok. The influence of Viking mythology on culture. Viking mythology had a profound influence on the culture and values of the Norse people. Many aspects of Viking society, such as their warrior ethos, were influenced by the myths surrounding gods like Odin and Thor. The Vikings believed in the concept of honor in battle and the idea of an afterlife in Valhalla for those who died bravely. These beliefs motivated the Vikings in their raids and conquests during the Viking Age, which lasted from the late 8th century to the early 11th century. The conversion to Christianity. The Viking Age eventually came to an end as Scandinavia was gradually converted to Christianity between the 10th and 12th centuries. This conversion was often a slow process, with Viking leaders accepting Christianity for political reasons while the common people continued to worship the old gods. Over time, the Christian Church, led by popes like Gregory the Great and Urban II, began to exert greater influence over the region. By the time of Pope Innocent III, Christianity had become the dominant religion in Scandinavia, and many of the old myths were either forgotten or transformed within the context of Christian teachings. However, Viking mythology survived in Iceland, where the myths were preserved in written form by scholars and poets. Today, these stories continue to captivate the imagination of people worldwide, inspiring literature, films, and even modern religious movements like Asatru, a revival of the Old Norse religion. The legacy of Viking mythology. The legacy of Viking mythology extends far beyond the Viking Age. In modern times, the myths have been adapted into various forms of popular culture. Norse gods, particularly Thor, have become iconic figures in comic books, films, and video games. These depictions often blend elements of the original myths with modern interpretations, keeping Viking mythology alive in contemporary culture. Additionally, Viking mythology has influenced various modern movements, including neo-paganism and the aforementioned Asatru. These groups seek to revive the religious practices of the ancient Norse and honor the gods and goddesses of Viking mythology. The runes and magic. In Viking mythology, runes were more than just a writing system. They were symbols of magic and power. The runes were believed to hold mystical significance, and their use in divination, protection, and other magical practices was widespread. Odin himself was said to have gained knowledge of the runes through a self-sacrificial ritual, hanging from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights. The runes were inscribed on amulets, weapons, and stones, serving both practical and spiritual purposes. The concept of satyr, a form of Norse magic, was also significant in Viking mythology. Satyr involved the manipulation of fate and was primarily practiced by women, known as vulvas. These seeresses were highly respected in Viking society for their ability to foretell the future and communicate with the spiritual world. The gods of the Vanir. In addition to the Aesir gods, Viking mythology also featured the Vanir, a group of gods associated with fertility, prosperity, and nature. The Vanir lived in Vanaheim, another of the 9 worlds. The most prominent members of the Vanir were Njord, the god of the sea, and his children Freyr and Freya. Freyr was a god of fertility and abundance, while Freya was a goddess of love, beauty, and war. After a war between the Aesir and Vanir, the two groups of gods made peace and exchanged hostages. Njord, Freyr, and Freya came to live among the Aesir in Asgard. The importance of fertility and the natural world in Viking mythology reflected the agricultural basis of Viking society. The gods of the Vanir were often invoked in rituals related to farming, fishing, and other activities essential for survival. The role of heroes. Sigurd, also known as Siegfried, is one of the central figures in both Norse and Germanic mythology. He was a legendary hero, best known for slaying the dragon Fafnir, a feat which granted him wisdom and great wealth. Sigurd's tale, which includes themes of betrayal, revenge, and tragic love, has been immortalized in the Volsunga saga and later in Richard Wagner's Ring cycle. Another notable hero is Beowulf, who, while more closely associated with Anglo-Saxon literature, shares common elements with Viking mythology, particularly in his battles against monsters and dragons. Heroes like Sigurd embodied the Viking values of bravery, honor, and a willingness to face impossible odds. The role of women in Viking mythology. Women in Viking mythology were often depicted as powerful and influential figures. Goddesses like Freya and Frigg were central to many myths, embodying various aspects of life, such as fertility, love, fate, and motherhood. Mortal women also played critical roles in the sagas and myths, often depicted as strong, independent, and capable of wielding great power. The Valkyries, for example, were female warriors who served Odin and were responsible for choosing who lived and died on the battlefield. Similarly, the Norns, who controlled fate itself, were female deities whose decisions could not be overridden by even the most powerful gods. Valkyries were not merely passive agents of fate, they were depicted as fierce and independent beings. This portrayal of women as both nurturers and warriors reflects the societal role of women in Viking culture, where women could own land, divorce their husbands, and even participate in warfare. Mythological creatures and beings. Viking mythology is rich with a variety of mythical creatures and beings, many of which played vital roles in the cosmology of the Norse world. One of the most famous is the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, a giant serpent that encircles the world. Jormungandr is the child of Loki and the giantess Angerboda and is fated to fight Thor during Ragnarok. The battle between Thor and Jormungandr is one of the most significant moments in the end-of-world myth, with both figures slaying each other. Fenrir, another of Loki's offspring, is a monstrous wolf destined to kill Odin during Ragnarok. Fenrir's immense strength and the fear he inspired among the gods led to his imprisonment, though the prophecy of his role in the world's destruction could not be avoided. There were also the dwarves, skilled craftsmen who lived in the realm of Svartalfheim. They were responsible for creating some of the most powerful artifacts in Norse mythology, including Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, and Odin's spear, Gungnir. The Light Elves, who lived in Alfheim, were beings of beauty and goodness, often compared to angels in later Christian interpretations. Animals and symbolism. Animals played significant roles in Viking mythology, often representing the forces of nature and the gods themselves. Odin was often accompanied by two ravens, Hugin, Thought, and Munin, Memory, who flew across the world and brought back information to their master. He was also flanked by two wolves, Jerry and Freki, symbolizing his connection to both wisdom and warfare. Thor's chariot was pulled by two goats, Tangrisnir and Tanjostr. These goats had the ability to be killed and eaten each night, only to be resurrected the following day, symbolizing the cycles of death and rebirth. The serpent and wolf figures, like Jormungandr and Fenrir, often represented chaos and destruction but were also essential to the cosmic balance in the mythological framework. Yggdrasil and the World Tree. Yggdrasil, the World Tree, is one of the most significant symbols in Viking mythology. This immense ash tree connects the 9 worlds and serves as a cosmic axis. At its roots dwell the Norns, who weave the fates of gods and men, while at its highest branches resides the eagle, a symbol of divine wisdom. Yggdrasil's roots extend into various realms, including Niflheim, where the dragon Needhawk gnaws at the tree's base. The tree's health and stability reflect the state of the cosmos. As Ragnarok approaches, Yggdrasil begins to tremble, signifying the end of the world. The symbolism of Yggdrasil emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things in Viking mythology, from the gods to mortals, and from nature to the supernatural. The tree's role as a life force, continually under threat from destructive forces, mirrors the Norse understanding of the precarious balance between order and chaos. The afterlife. The concept of the afterlife in Viking mythology was complex, with multiple destinations depending on how one lived and died. Warriors who died bravely in battle were taken by the Valkyries to Valhalla, where they joined Odin's army of Einherjar, preparing for the Battle of Ragnarok. Valhalla was not the only afterlife destination. Freya, the goddess of love and war, received half of the fallen warriors in her hall, Sesrumur. Those who died of illness or old age were sent to Hel, a realm ruled by the goddess Hel, Loki's daughter. Hel was a grim, cold place located in Niflheim, though it was not a place of punishment like the Christian concept of hell. Instead, it was where the dead resided until the end of the world. The Viking conception of death and the afterlife was shaped by their understanding of fate and honor. Dying in battle was seen as the ultimate honor, while dying peacefully, though not shameful, did not grant access to the prestigious halls of Valhalla or Sesrumur. Rituals and worship. Viking religious practices involved rituals, sacrifices, and festivals aimed at honoring the gods and ensuring good fortune. These rituals took place in sacred groves, temples, and during seasonal festivals. Blot, or blood sacrifice, was a common form of worship, where animals, and sometimes humans, were sacrificed to appease the gods and seek their favor. The major seasonal festivals included Yule, a midwinter festival honoring the sun's return, and Althing, where important decisions were made under the gods' guidance. Though Viking religious practices were predominantly polytheistic, certain gods were more important in different regions. Thor, for example, was particularly revered among farmers and warriors, while Freyr was central to fertility rites and agricultural success. The Viking worldview. At the core of Viking mythology was a belief in the inevitability of fate. The gods themselves were not immune to the forces of destiny, and even their vast power could not prevent the eventual arrival of Ragnarok. This acceptance of fate shaped the Viking worldview, instilling in them a sense of fatalism but also a desire to live with honor, courage, and boldness. The Viking sagas, filled with tales of tragic heroes and doomed gods, reflect this belief in fate. Yet, the Vikings did not view this as a reason for despair. Instead, they sought to embrace the challenges and hardships of life, seeing in their struggles a chance to prove their worth before the gods.